Okay, cool. Hey everyone, thanks so much for being here and welcome to the Colliders Lunch and Learn series. Just curious, for who is it their first time here at the Collider? Okay, nice. A lot of new faces. Well, welcome. My name's Tori Greaves. I'm the Entrepreneurship Manager here at the Collider. And we're really happy to offer these events free and open to the public. And if you're interested in learning more about the Collider, our co-working offices, programming, please come talk to me afterwards. We have our big Climate City Expo coming up in a couple weeks at the kickoff on March 29th. So that'll be a 10-day kind of climate celebration here in Asheville with a hackathon, a business conference, Bill Nye's coming, Catherine Wilkinson's coming. So a lot of great, exciting stuff going on. And all that information's on our website. Without further ado, because I know this is an awesome presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Leah Quintal and Wolf Fulsher of Status Forward, who are going to be telling us about all the SEO bloopers that we should not make. So pass it off to you guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tori and the Collider, for having us. It's great to see so many people here for this. It's a little terrifying too, but yeah, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about SEO and basically things to avoid. If you're about to build a new website or you have an existing site that you're thinking about overhauling, these are kind of some pointers to keep in mind, some things that we see a lot with our clients. We're both with Status Forward. And yes, Wolf is my real name. That's not really me. Leah here this is our first time presenting together, so she's in for a treat. Status Forward, we're a digital branding agency. We're just across the park here on Wall Street. So we do branding, we do web development. I'm a web developer. Leah handles the SEO and content strategy, and she's terrific, and thankfully she can do most of the talking today. Little does she know. So she's going to talk about some of the SEO stuff, and I'm going to get a little bit technical a little bit later on, but I will hand it off to her now.
All right, so I think before we dig into SEO mistakes, some of the details, we're going to kind of do a checklist for you. But first we have to put SEO in context, because I think that that is actually one of the biggest mistakes people make, is a misunderstanding of how SEO actually fits into a sales funnel. And if you don't understand that, then you don't really know how to measure what you're doing or understand the impacts that you're making or what you're contributing to. So SEO mistake number one, we're going to establish some context, and it's really missing the forest for the trees. So I've got some pictures here for you that I drew. So let's talk about how SEO is just a piece of your marketing efforts and how it fits in. So SEO is one channel through which you are typically driving traffic to your website, and that's organic traffic. So your other channels might be PR and referral and social media and ads, or anybody, partners and affiliates. All of those channels are driving traffic to your website. And then typically one common conversion path is you get people to come to your website, you have something they want to do there. A lot of times it's like sign up for an email, you want to get that email capture, and then you use that email to deliver things like discount codes, promotions, or something like that. And then ultimately you drive someone back to your website where they convert, which may be purchasing something. So SEO is one of those channels. So if we blow up SEO as the channel, typically how that works is you're building a net through your post and pages. So you're growing your site and you're creating many different doorways through which someone can enter. And essentially it kind of works as like a post network and a page network, and people are arriving on each of those places. So when you're building traffic from all those different places, your website's appearing in search results for lots of different terms, ultimately increasing the awareness of your brand, because true success for SEO and really any marketing effort is that you're increasing your branded traffic. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to be developing lots of content and appearing in search results in different ways. People start to familiarize your brand with the topics that are core to what you do, and then they'll start searching for you by name. And ultimately, if someone's searching for you by name, the conversion rates are going to be much better and higher because they already know who you are and what you do. So I'm going to do a couple examples of putting the SEO perspective in a marketing funnel. So let's say this is this guy, Brian Dean, who is an SEO master. He's one of my favorites. But a lot of times when you're looking for examples of SEO done well, it's somebody who is selling SEO services. So Brian Dean is this guy where he has a course, and it's a course for learning SEO. So his ultimate goal is to get more people to pay for his course because that's how he makes money. So now let's like reverse engineer and figure out, how does SEO itself fit into that objective? So first, if you're going to be like, if I don't know who he is, why would I even buy a course from him? I wouldn't. So first, what he needs to do is figure out, using search results, how does he get in front of people that would make the right candidates to buy this course? And so part of that is just demonstrating expertise on topics that are relevant to the course that he's offering. So we're going to look at some keywords and some search volumes. So if I'm someone that's interested in keyword research, which is a piece of SEO, ultimately this course might be relevant for me. Let's look at the search results. So I'm researching keyword research. I know it's getting a little meta here. That phrase itself has 12,000 searches per month on average. That's a lot. And the other numbers I have here is 83% of those actually result in clicks and search results. Because a lot of times these days, like, Google is just putting things in search results. There might not be a click whatsoever, or people might be clicking on ads. And then we have a dollar amount here where, should you pay for an ad on this keyword, it's at on average $7 per click. And when you see numbers like that, you know it's going to be really competitive. So here we have the first page of search results for this search phrase with 12,000 searches. And we see this guide, Keyword Research for SEO, the definitive guide 2019 update. So this guy who has the course that he wants to sell me, this is his post. And that post is getting over 3,000 visits per month. So if I'm interested in this topic, I'm a potential candidate to buy this course. I see his result, I click on it. So once I click on it, it's an incredibly informative resource. It's really great. And then I get a pop-up that sign up for this free newsletter for exclusive strategies not found on the blog. That's pretty compelling. So even though I don't know who this is yet, I see that he has a really good guide on a topic that I'm interested in learning more about. So then I sign up for the email, and then I'm getting delivered content regularly that is proving to me that this guy's worth his salt when it comes to SEO, because I'm getting this great content to my inbox. So ultimately, I get an email that's announcing this course. So I've been in the funnel for a while now, with the ultimate objective of him selling me this course. And then I get the email and I buy the course. So how SEO fits into that in terms of building towards your funnel is that brand awareness piece and making that first early connection. I think a mistake that people often make is when they're thinking about SEO, they're thinking too far down the funnel. They're thinking of these conversions as like, buy this now, and if you haven't done that, then your effort wasn't successful. But that's not the case. Most SEO efforts are going to be further up in your funnel, and what you're doing is building brand awareness and trying to get that first interaction, which is usually like a lot of times an email capture. So that's how it worked for him. Let's do another example, because not everyone has a sales, is looking at selling courses. So e-commerce tends to be more straightforward. So if I'm a company selling cat-themed clothing, this is a really clear search. If I'm searching for it, that's what I want. So this phrase has 450 searches a month. 78% of people click on the organic search results, and we see if you want to pay for it, it costs 70 cents a click. So for this, if this is what you sell, of course you want to be at the top of search results. And what we see is the top of search results is one of my favorite websites for examples. meowingtons.com. So we see they're in the first position of search results. And this helps for context too, because just being number one in search results, which can be extremely difficult to get to, doesn't mean that you get a ton of traffic if there's ads in the way. For example, a lot of people are just going to click on these ads. But what you're doing is capturing, like the page itself and the post itself are their own nets of keywords. So this cat-themed apparel page, which is one of their apparel collections, actually earns 1,300 visitors a month, even though this keyword phrase we're looking at has only 450 searches a month, because it's its own net. So this is a super direct one, how SEO works, why it's important to be there. Being number one is really hard, but it's clear how this fits in the funnel. Clothing for cats. Even if I don't make that first purchase, which I might, that type of keyword search indicates that I'm prepared to buy. But, you know, a lot of times if you sign up for an email, you get a discount code. So ultimately, I'm going to do that. But then I'm in their funnel for a long time. I've become a long-term customer because I get those emails all the time. So, like I said, let's look at SEO from the other side. So the most direct is, of course, like, I am a store that sells clothing for cats. I want to appear at the top of search results for clothing for cats or cat-themed clothing. That's really difficult because keywords that are likely to convert, again, have more ads in the way, and there's a lot more competition, especially if other people are doing the same way or same thing. So part of what you do is have to get creative about it and look at exploring content that relates to your brand that may not be as competitive and may not have ads in the way and may lead to other clicks. And the objective of that is not necessarily to get a purchase in that moment. It's to get an email capture or something else, or start building your brand awareness. So let's look at how Meowingtons has actually built their site up to the extent that they can be number one for more competitive and highly convertible keywords like cat-themed clothing. So hot guys with cats, it's a thing on the internet. People love it. So it's 300 searches per month. But what we see is 100% of people are clicking in the organic search results. They're not clicking ads because there aren't any ads, because nobody's going to spend money advertising for a keyword phrase like that that doesn't lead to an automatic conversion, which means it's a lot easier to be there and get attention and get your brand name out there. So this topic for them is consistent with their brand. Like, the brand is really fun. They have silly puns. They do like cat wine. So this type of, basically I'm saying this isn't a weird thing for them to target because it relates to how they present themselves online anyway. So they're in the third position of search results for this, and the post gets 118 visitors per month. And why this is important, again, is that you're building brand awareness, and then potentially when I end up on this post, I'm still getting these pop-ups that say things like, you know, subscribe meow, and I'll get 20% off my first order. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm in their funnel, even though before researching, you know, dudes with cats, I didn't know who they were, but now I'm becoming a regular, like, I'm receiving their marketing materials regularly, and I'm actually buying things from them. So just to put it in perspective for Meowingtons as a whole, so these are their blog stats. They get over 12,000 visitors per month from their blog posts, but they've done 563. So if they were going to pay for advertising instead, like, if you don't appear organically, a lot of people just resort to paying for ads. That's an investment. So this is kind of an estimation of what that monthly cost would be if they were paying for advertisements on these keywords instead of appearing organically with posts. So 12,000 visitors is pretty good, but the context here is the amount of effort that goes into it. You do have to be creating content regularly to continue to build that net. And ultimately, the goal, again, is like building your branded search. Like, that's part of why you want to appear all over the place on the internet, is so people start saying, oh, Meowington's right. I'm going to get something from them because it's like my sister's birthday or something. So they now have 10,000 searches per month. And a few years ago, like, they didn't exist at all. Like, they really have done a great job. It's been a meowsing, honestly. But, like, to back it out again and look at the context for how SEO functions. Because the misconception is that SEO is this magic bullet that can do everything, and that's not true at all. So for Meowingtons, they actually have, like, look at these social stats. They have over 300,000 followers on Facebook and on Instagram and 800,000 on Facebook. Those are insane numbers. So it's entirely possible that for them, when you look at it in perspective, social media is actually going to be a greater driver of sales than SEO is. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do SEO, but the point is to put it in perspective. Like, don't confuse your channels and your expectations with what the objectives are. So where social media could potentially drive like great flash sales or something like that, your SEO efforts in this context might be building brand awareness and acquiring emails, not immediately selling something on the first interaction. Okay, so now that we have some context, let's just keep looking at the search results, because this is something that I've seen for years, and it kind of, I'm always astonished that people continue to do this, which is not actually look at search results for things that they want to rank for, which you got to do that, because that's what you're competing with. So if there are keywords you want to rank for, like, actually Google them, see what's there, consider who are those sites. Can you compete with them? Are you like a small e-commerce store and Amazon and eBay are everywhere? You're probably not going to be able to compete right there. And also, could you do something better? If it's something educational or content related, you have more you could add. So for example, if you are let's say you make a data visualization tool. Of course, that's a very compelling search. You're like, I'm a data visualization tool, I want to appear for that. But let's look at the actual search results. So first we have a bunch of ads, which means you have to anyone has to scroll. We have to scroll through the ads. That's already taking up room in search results. That creates more competition, and you lose more people when they're scrolling through those ads. So what next? So this is the rest of the first page of search results for that keyword phrase. And what we see here is that what people are really looking for when they're looking for data visualization tools is not you who makes it. We're looking for review sites and lists and comparisons, because that's what you trust. You trust like someone else aggregating all the data visualization tools and giving you the pros and cons. So if I'm trying to target this from an SEO perspective, that's not the best strategy, because that's not the intent of the searcher. If I want to know what's best out there, I'm not going to trust someone that just calls themselves best, the company. So a better strategy here would be to not optimize, like, while you of course should optimize for what you are, that wouldn't be the most effective SEO strategy for a data visualization tool. Instead, in search results like this, you would want to just make sure you're part of these lists, because that's what everyone's clicking on. And if you're not on those lists, you're not getting the traffic that they're getting. You're not going to get this traffic. Okay, so the other thing is, like, if you Google something and the keyword triggers a map listing or other review sites, this changes your SEO strategy as well, which actually leads to another SEO mistake to avoid, which is if you are paying someone to do SEO work for you, like, make sure you're investing in the right kind of SEO, because there are different kinds of SEO. So the first would be, if you are relying on people to show up to a brick and mortar establishment, go with the local SEO person, because what you really need is to look at your Google business listing and make sure that your like name and address and phone number are consistent, like all your citations are consistent, and maybe build reviews. That is completely different than a content-based strategy that's typically aimed at building brand awareness and presence from a national standpoint. And then international SEO, if you're trying to rank for different languages or in different countries, like, go with an international SEO expert, because there are so many considerations, technical and otherwise, that don't apply to companies that are really just focused on appearing in the US. And then if you're an e-commerce operation, for example, Amazon has more product-related searches than Google. If that is where you think you can play, or it's not reasonable to assume that your website can compete this way, then work with an actual Amazon optimization specialist, because Amazon optimization is completely different than optimizing for search results in Google. And with that, I'm going to move into some technical components.
So before we came here today, Leah said that this is the most important part of the presentation. So, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit, get a little bit more in detail with some of the technical aspects about your actual website and some things to keep in mind. So the big thing is the speed of the internet. I mean, I think that's a number one priority now, because you don't have people who are just accessing your website from their desktop computer, their home internet broadband. They're looking at it on their phones. And when people visit your site and it takes forever to load, they're going to very likely leave. And you can see from the statistic here that Amazon pays close attention to it because they have a lot to lose if their site takes too long to load. Everything we're talking here is about user experience. So, back in the day when I first started, I worked for a travel publisher, and they put everything online, and their strategy was just to stuff all the content with as many keywords as possible so that a human being really would not want to read the content. Now I think what we're veering towards is that we're more interested in the human experience, what people are experiencing when they're visiting your website. So that applies to not only the speed, but the content you're writing, keeping in mind whether your site is going to meet their expectations and guide them on their journey throughout your site, rather than you throwing a whole bunch of things at them, bells and whistles that they really probably don't even want. So for Christmas, my wife asked for an Instapot, and I was kind of excited about this because I like steel-cut oats. But the problem was it took forever to make them, and I thought, oh, the Instapot's going to be great. Well, so I looked up a recipe for it, and you can see here that I found this site, and it took 12.7 seconds to load. So I was already kind of behind the 8 ball there with trying to hurry up the process. Big part of the reason for that is that this site, and this is pretty common with recipe websites, are just loaded down with ads. Sometimes you'll see sliders on sites like this. Not so much on recipe sites, but sliders are kind of the bane of my existence. I'm completely against sliders because, again, it's a user experience issue. People don't sit and watch for slides to load. So if you visit commonly you'll see on the top banner, the hero image on a home page, it cycles through image after image, and sometimes there will be directional arrows on there where you can actually flip back and forth throughout. Sometimes there won't be, so it takes the control away from the user. But another big part of that is that they take forever to load. It's a loading issue too. So it's a bell and whistle that you don't really necessarily need, and sometimes it can actually harm you. The same thing goes for social media feeds. What this does is it creates an external request. So what that means is you're going out to, if you have a Twitter feed, you're making a request to Twitter to bring in those tweets to your website. So you have to wait. Your page waits until that content can be delivered to your homepage or wherever you have it. So really the bottom line is, if there's any functionality that you really don't necessarily need, I mean, it might look cool or seem cutting edge, but if it detracts from the user experience, it's something you want to avoid. So err on the side of minimalism with this. Sometimes you might actually, if you're having a developer work on your site, you might have to rein them in a little bit. They might want to go overboard by demonstrating what they can do with code. Put on the brakes if necessary, especially if it's getting you a rating of an F there. And by the way, GT metrics is a good tool to kind of test how your site's doing. It compares a bunch of different speed test um, sites, puts them together, and gives you kind of an overall score. So the easy path, yeah. So that first line there about the short-term solutions, everybody has a budget, especially when you're first starting out. You have a budget, you might not have a lot of time, or you might be inclined to do things yourself. That can have those long-term consequences. If you're delivering a bad experience, Leah was talking about the brand awareness. You want to set off on the right foot, initially as best as possible. So my recommendation is to try to avoid some of the quick fix solutions to getting your site up and running. We work with WordPress, so we build primarily WordPress websites, and it's common for do-it-yourselfers to install a page builder. And really what that does is it allows you to mess with the design yourself, create your own look and feel for the website. And if you're not a designer, 99.9% of the time that turns into a disaster. Your code also becomes a disaster. It's the code behind the site is not easy for, in general, it's not easy for search engines to crawl and make sense of, to build context out of. So page builders, another thing that we see, shortcut that we see people take is that they might take a great image on their phone, and they want to get on their website right away, and they just upload it immediately to the website. The problem is the images that you take on their phone are meant to be printed. So they're a lot larger than they need to be on the website. So the step in between you need to take is to use Photoshop or some photo editing tool. Pixlr is another one, where you can reduce the file size of those images, because nobody wants to sit and just wait for that endless scroll. You can almost hear the old modem sound, from the 90s. And the third thing there is the opt for better hosting, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But good hosting can make a world of difference with the speed of your website and how fast it loads. Okay, so this might give you a headache if you look at it too long. This is actually something you want to do with your website, and this is compress, minify your code. If you're working with a developer, they should do this for you. This basically just removes a lot of extra garbage in your code, like comments and line breaks, and it just reduces the file size that you're loading. So again, the smaller the file size, the faster the website loads. So with WordPress, there's some plugins that can do this for you if you don't have a developer who's compressing your code. Auto-optimize is a good one that I've used. Caching is another important thing. So I talked about finding a good host. A lot of hosts will help cache your website. But caching basically stores a copy of your website on another server, and it doesn't do all the requests to the database, and it helps load the page quicker for people who are returning to it. So try to invest in some caching. Another plugin is WP Rocket. I've seen a lot of people use. But if you have good hosting, they should take care of that. Cloudflare is another service. If you have an international site, if you have international sales that you're trying to achieve, Cloudflare will have servers all around the world and will load your content a lot faster than if they're loading it from a server in New York City. So yeah, don't skimp on the hosting. Hopefully no one's from Bluehost here, because I'll get in trouble. But, shared hosting, I mean, what that means is you're sharing your server with a bunch of unknown sites. You don't know how many sites there are, and you don't know what kind of websites they are. So shared hosting can slow down your website when more and more websites are stuffed onto your server. It can also be a security risk because, again, if someone else's site gets infected with something, it can spread to yours. So these are a few hosts that we have worked with. We primarily work with WP Engine and Flywheel. SiteGround is probably a less expensive option, but again, if you opt for the shared hosting choice, the cheapest option, you're going to run into some of those issues. Pantheon is more for developers. It's not a terribly easy user interface. They just got I think a $40 million investment though, so that service may improve. And Amazon's AWS service is another server hosting platform that people are now using a lot. Also, another thing to consider too are domains. So if you're purchasing a domain, do that early, well before your website is finished. You want to make sure you reserve that domain name as quickly as possible and reserve it for bare minimum of 3 years. I'd say 5 would probably be optimal, just to show Google that you're serious about what you're doing. Reserve that domain through a separate service than the hosting company that you're going to use. We run into issues when we're working with clients who have their domains and their hosts on the same service. If it's something like GoDaddy and we're putting them on a better host, it makes it more difficult to transfer that domain to the new host. Hover, Namecheap are a couple that we've used in the past that work pretty well. So security is another option. I've talked about the hosting and the risks there. You don't want to end up with that little message there on Google saying that your site is hacked. I've said neglect because the temptation is there if you built a site and you're not working with a blog, or you don't have a portfolio that you need to constantly update. The temptation is just to let it sit there and gather dust. Check on it. If you're using a WordPress website or Drupal or some content management system, especially if it's open source software, you want to make sure that software is updated frequently. Anytime an update comes out, or a bug fix or a security fix, you need to keep that up to date. WordPress has plugins, so that's extra functionality created by third parties. You want to make sure that you're updating those plugins immediately. But if we find a website has been hacked, it's generally because the people who have created user accounts to manage the admin on the site have used weak usernames and weak passwords. Don't use the same password that you use for your bank account on your website. Mix it up, use a very strong password, and make sure that you use a good username too that's not just your name. Because if you make your username obvious, it does half the work for the bots who are trying to break into the site. SSL, that's now a ranking tool that Google's using. That stands for Secure Socket Layer. It's, so you can see here that not secure message. Look at that. You want to try to remove that. And basically, if you're familiar with this, your domain would start with HTTP:. That's an insecure site, so you're wanting the S on the end of that, HTTPS. That basically just encrypts messages between the server and the browser. It's an extra layer of security, and Google's wanting you to do that now. There's a service called Let's Encrypt, which a lot of hosting companies are, you can automatically install it very quickly. It's a free service. It used to be you had to pay for those certificates. You still can, but Let's Encrypt is now free, so you don't have to pay that yearly fee for it. And forms, you can see I'm not a robot up there. Forms are the gateway for hackers into your website. So if you're including a lot of forms, make sure that you're using tools that are reputable, that have been around for a while. You're not building forms yourself with HTML, or if you are, make sure that you know what you're doing there, because that is basically the way to get into your website. We use Gravity Forms with WordPress. Ninja Forms is another one. I haven't used that in years, but Gravity Forms is the one that we use. And lastly, going mobile last, you know, most people now are very conscious of the mobile experience, and they're, you know, ensuring that their websites work well on phones. That's not always the case, though, and this would not be an SEO talk without a Ron Swanson reference. And this is kind of what I do now when I get a robocall. But, you know, make sure that your site works well on the mobile, and that means having text that's legible, it's not too small, that you're not loading super large images on the mobile experience, so you can, your developer, if you're writing your own code, can ensure that smaller images appear on mobile devices rather than just using the ones that appear on the desktop. Make sure your buttons are large enough for people to use fingers to click. You probably can't see this site here, but this is it's a site called Mile High Comics. It looks like they probably were a mile high when they developed this website, but you can see on the left that it's, I mean, that's impossible for somebody's finger to click on that to get where they're going. This site actually does really well, and I think this is an example of the brand awareness that Leah was talking about. People know the name, they know to search for it and find the comics, I guess, that they're looking for. This is also an example of Google's mobile friendly test. So if you're unsure of whether or not your website is mobile friendly, you can run the site URL through this tool, and it will tell you what you need to do to fix it. Back to you.
Okay. So Wolf did say, I did say the site speed part was the most important, and that's just because, like, if your site is loading slowly, it just creates terrible engagement metrics. And basically, just to put it in context from an SEO perspective, if you just think of your own user behavior, like if you go to a site and it takes forever to load, you just leave. And that means that's not a good search result. So Google's not going to deliver a bad search result. So if no one's engaging with your content because it takes too long to do so, then none of your SEO efforts are going to work because you don't have that proof to Google that it is working because of that. So definitely make sure that your sites are fast. So now we're going to just get into some detail things. I feel like we've done a lot with context, but one of the biggest SEO mistakes that I see regularly is just the simplest one to do, which is optimizing your metadata, your H1s, and your image alt tags. Like, this is detail work, and maybe that's why a lot of people don't do it, but it's super simple. So your meta title and your meta description, for those of you that do not know, are what appears in search results. So the how to decrystallize honey while keeping it raw. That's the meta title. And then we have a meta description down here. And so that's what if it's WordPress, we use Yoast a lot to do that. It's really easy to set your meta title and your meta description. And not all pages is it really important to do this for example, like your contact page. But if every service page, anywhere you think could appear in search results, any page that's focused on a topic, just be sure to optimize that meta title and meta description. And when you do it, if you can make it a compelling statement to inspire click-through, like you saw in that Brian Dean keyword research guide, it said 2019 update. That's a great thing to put in your meta title, because for someone like me, I'm like, oh, that's current. I'm going to click on that one. So anything you can do to inspire that click-through rate also shows it can help you move up in search results over time, for sure, if more people are clicking on it. And then this is just an example of that post itself and what you're setting. So these are your headers. Your header on a post is an H1 tag, and that should have a keyword in it. Every page should have one H1. This is really important. Probably the biggest mistake I see over and over again is when people don't have H1s on their home pages, or they don't do the metadata for their home pages or service pages. And sometimes that happens depending on how the site was designed, where people are kind of stylizing header tags and not realizing that to Google, your header structure and what's included in your header is an outline of what that page is about. So if you have a homepage and you don't have an H1, you're essentially telling Google you're not about anything, which you're not going to show up in search results then. So be really specific on the pages that are core. So that would be service pages, homepage, and then of course any content you're developing from a blogging perspective, you want to be very specific about what you're doing for your metadata and for your headers. And so the other thing is image optimization, because this is also super easy to do, and a lot of people don't do it. And it's more important for some companies than others. If obviously if you're selling, if you see when you're doing your due diligence and actually Googling the things you want to appear for, and you see a lot of images in the search results, that means image optimization is particularly important for you. Like, do people want to see visuals of something to compel them to take action on your website? If so, make sure that you have a good image file name. I just found this image on a client site recently, this like Hero 10-NXDZ3SMSMKB. Like, that's the image file name. So your image file name should actually describe what the image is. So for example, on the left, you have, it's an imperial purple orchid.jpg with hyphens in between. That's exactly what it is. Makes perfect sense. And then you also have an image alt tag. And again, in WordPress, it's easy to just set these whenever you do it. And the image alt tag should also include the keyword phrase and exactly what it is. So again, super simple things to do. That like if you optimize, if you do all of this, it just makes a huge impact. So now we're just going to do kind of a little series of quick, like, just don't do these things. So one is that I see a lot, don't put all of your services on one page. So if you are a company that has like service offerings or something, or the equivalent, like give each its own page. So on the left, you see an example. I had to go like way down in search results, like many pages in to find this, which I'm sorry for that. But if they just took all of those services and made them like the picture on the right, so each has its own page, you've just made a world of difference, because Google treats every page as a different opportunity for something to appear in search results. So if I'm looking for pruning on the one page, it's part of a whole list of services, like that doesn't have the capacity to appear in search results, than a service page for a competitor that actually has a page focused specifically on pruning. So that's a really simple thing you can do. And really it just kind of underscores something that's more important to do for SEO, which is be really mindful of your site architecture and how content functions, like what are your folders, what gets pages, what should get pages. So this was something I saw on someone's site, which was pretty amazing. So specifically in WordPress, it's really easy under development to accidentally tell Google not to index your site. If your site's not getting indexed, it's not going to appear in search results at all. So don't no index your site. But it happens. That was like one of those egregious horror stories that I've seen before. And another one, just don't not do this, which is set up your 301 redirects if you're launching a new site. And basically what that means is if you're building a site if you're doing a new site and you have a different URL structure than you did before, you have to make sure that you tell Google that this page that used to have this URL is now this page. And if you don't do that, you've basically like decimated your opportunity to retain any authority you've ever earned on your website or appear in search results. So it's really sad when that happens, because it's something you have to be mindful of before you start working on relaunching a new website, so you can set that up correctly and make sure that Google knows this page that used to be beard grooming is now like beard groom or something like that. So that it would be so sad, basically, if you had a page that was earning tons of traffic and then you change the URL and it's just a 404 and you no longer get that traffic. And then keyword stuff. This is something I think most people have come to realize we don't do anymore, as Wolf said. And again, like, so I was just trying to find an example of someone doing this. And again, the thing about it is, I mean, real estate stuff, they're notorious for bad tactics because it can work briefly, but keyword stuffing doesn't work anymore. I actually had to go to like the 6th page of search results to find this. But as you can see, I mean, part of the reason it doesn't work is like, even if it works briefly, it's never going to work at all because when you go here, the experience, the user experience is terrible and the engagement, it like, you know, just doesn't work anymore. And yeah, those are kind of the quick ones. And then Wolf and I kind of put together some tools here that can help you check things out for yourself. So WooRank is a free like SEO assessment site where you can kind of just plug your site in once and get a little score that can give you some ideas for some of these things I've mentioned, like do you have an H1 on your homepage, that type of thing. And then Wolf mentioned GT metrics for checking out your speed and different things related to that. And then Screaming Frog is great for exporting a spreadsheet of your entire site. So because I said optimizing your metadata and your headers is really easy and something everyone should do, you can use this tool to just kind of export your site and it'll give you like, here's all of your current meta titles and all of your current meta descriptions, which can make it a lot easier to approach from like a workflow standpoint. And then Moz Local, if you are someone that relies on like localized search, this is a tool where you can kind of plug your site in and see if your citations are consistent in different places on the internet. And thanks. So there's time for questions.
I do. You know, I talked earlier about, you know, taking the easy path, but sometimes you just, I mean, you can't afford to build a $6,000 website. I think Squarespace has its place, and they are a tool that will help you get up and running fairly quickly, and their interface has gotten better through the years. So it's a perfectly viable solution for some startups or some companies that are just trying to get their footing. I mean, particularly if you have just a brochure site. Like I said, we use WordPress, which is a content management system, which is built to, you know, grow as you grow, and you can take ownership of the content, and it's your site, you own it. But there's definitely some practical utility in having, you know, a Squarespace site. So we do use a plugin called WP, or it's actually just Smush now, and that does a lot of good. It'll compress it. Some of those will go off to an external server to do the compression and then come back to your site, and some hosts will not allow you to have that plugin on your website. And they, you know, Smush won't do all the work for you. If you load something off of your phone and it's 3 megabytes in size, it's not going to do you much good. So it's usually a good rule of thumb to use some photo software to reduce the size of it, preferably below 1 meg, really ideally below 500 kilobytes or lower. Well, I mean, that would probably require a full other session to discuss that. I mean, I think it's becoming, I don't know if it's becoming more common or not. Because, you know, like I mentioned before, people are now using SSL and becoming more conscious of it. But for example, you know, WordPress is an open source software, so everyone does have access to it. If you're not updating your plugins and updating the software, you know, you do leave yourself at risk. But you know, the motivation for doing it is it's money. You know, to get people to click on a link to go to a site where they can collect ad revenue, or to be more malicious, to install some malware on your computer so that they can monitor what you're doing, or, you know, worse.
So a lot of people, like, that's called black hat SEO stuff, and a lot of hackers are doing it for SEO purposes for other sites. So they'll like find entries into existing sites that have vulnerabilities and then create pages and links to the sites that they want to rank. So we've seen that before, like found these hidden pages on sites that had been compromised. So there's like a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to do it.
Right now, we're using WP Engine. It's WordPress managed hosting. We also use Flywheel, which has kind of it has a more user-friendly interface, I think, for people who are doing it themselves. But those are the two that we primarily use.
You mean like sites like Yelp? Yeah, so you're talking about kind of how you gauge the impact? Oh, okay. So the question is about kind of on a local SEO side of things, like reviews, and kind of in terms of if people pay for getting reviews, I mean, I actually had a friend get caught in kind of a scam doing this, where she used to write reviews on Fiverr at $5 a pop, but like Fiverr kind of shut it down. So I mean, there's always ways of there's always that black hat area where something might work for a little bit. But I think a lot of the platforms have gotten pretty good at taking down like false reviews. Though of course people totally pay for it. The local SEO has a lot of gray area that's, I couldn't say like do that, but if I was doing it for myself, I would probably explore it. But in general, in terms of how things are working, I think a lot of times what people tend to fail to do, especially if you're assessing your site and where you should invest and spend more time and energy, is actually going ahead too and looking in analytics and looking at your referral traffic and seeing what efforts pay off. So for example, if it's a local organization, like I know a lot of companies get tons of traffic from Romantic Asheville, because they are like top of search results for tons of local related searches. So like the easy way to find out if your investment and what you're paying to be there is working is just to look at your referral traffic and analytics. And I think a lot of people sort of fail to do that when you look at the techniques from a local SEO perspective and where traffic's coming from.
I don't know that I can really answer that because I don't work much with Squarespace or Wix. I would imagine since they're not necessarily open source, that they might have a tighter lid on some of their code, but it's not really easy for me to say. I'm not quite sure. I would hope that they take it seriously. I would think it works. It's nice not having to add that extra layer of engagement where they have to click on that thing, and from a design standpoint, it's not very attractive. But yeah, I haven't necessarily had any issues with it.
I think that's very questionable. Because it's like, it's all about, I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about in general with SEO is like, there's either authenticity or feigned authenticity, and like any kind of copy and pasting is like, I'm actually not sure if that would hurt you on a local SEO front, but a general rule of thumb is never copy and paste anything, because like if it's organic SEO, something that's copied and pasted it reduces your authority, and it kind of like spreads yourself thin. So I would really just for your site, like if there's a one review area that you need to focus on more, or separate it out, like direct people to different places. But I'd honestly have to think more about that from like, because my focus is less local SEO and more national. But I would definitely exercise caution. So the question was about the no indexing thing. I'm so glad you asked. Because the site, I can't really tell you, but the site that I found it on, like, it's a massive company that makes like a crazy amount of money. And how did that ever happen? Like, they do all of their conversions come from paid advertising, which I think like they started somewhere along the line. Someone decided to start no indexing because they were focusing specifically on landing pages created for paid advertising campaigns. But then I think what happens is in companies, like someone goes, someone comes back, nobody like nobody switched it back so the site could be indexed and appear in search results. And then they were wondering why like SEO work wasn't working. And it's because you can't build pages that Google's not reading and expect them to be in search results. So I think it was just kind of something that happened, probably a mix-up in who's running the show in terms of marketing over there. Yeah, so one of Google's guidelines is you don't want floating pages on your site. And a floating page is a page that isn't connected into your architecture. And a lot of times they're designed to just deliver really quick messages to drive conversion as quickly as possible. So Google, like floating pages can look manipulative, which is why you no index them, so Google can't see them. But it also means you're typically driving traffic through paid advertising. And that page you're designing is just to get someone who, like, let's say you created an ad on data visualization tools. You would have them go to a page that's just kind of floating on your site and just as succinctly and quickly as possible get someone to like sign up for something or do something. So basically no indexing allows you to have the freedom to explore landing pages without the worry of Google guidelines. Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Especially in other types of, yeah. So I'm thinking more of like tactics. Right. So anything that's kind of behind a wall, like a member portal or something like that, that you wouldn't want to appear in search results, you can no index those so that they don't. And sometimes people do that if they don't want, if they're creating content that they don't want to be available unless someone has done like XYZ or something. If you don't know index it, then creative explorers can find it online anyway. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.